Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hey kids, welcome to Grumpy Nostalgia, the Second Look Cinema podcast, the show where we go back to the blockbuster new release wall of our memory, grab a copy off the shelf, pop it in the old VCR, and see what time has done to it. I'm Justin, that's Mike.
Dun-dun.
And we're here to help you navigate all the landmines littered down memory lane. So Mike kind of, spoiled the entire episode for us.
Oh, yeah. Ruined it. I hope you didn't see that title when you clicked on this podcast.
Yeah, but those two notes really just kind of tell the whole story here. I guess before we get started, Mike, I just kind of want to share a little information with the audience. We keep relatively good track of our metrics and analytics and stuff for the show, but we're both taken aback a little bit. The last couple of weeks here, and we don't quite understand it, the audience and the numbers of downloads have just exponentially blown up. Like scary, like something's afoot, Mike.
Interesting.
But just give you guys a rough idea of what we typically get in a month in downloads the last 2 or 3 months. We got in one day. So we don't understand it, but we know you guys are responsible for it, and we're just kind of excited as hell. So we're
there's only a couple things I could say to that. It would be Guten Tag and good day.
Yeah, Mike is referencing our international audience. We have regular listeners in Germany and now in Perth, Australia. So we want to thank you guys for hitching your wagon or hitching up to this train wreck.
Welcome.
Yeah, so there we go. To that point, we've had some good downloads, and they've been really on some dog movies, Mike. The bulk of that is really kind of based around some of the 3 of the 4 last movies we've kind of done are neither beloved or reviled, but they're just kind of in the middle there. So
and we needed a palate cleanser, so to speak, to get that junk out of our minds and out of our mouth.
Yeah, so we're considering this kind of a cleanse. We're there's other words for that, but we decided we wanted to check out a good movie. So this week, of course, as the title indicates, and Mike's phonetic clue gave away, we're going to talk about Jaws from 1975, Mike.
Wow.
This movie's nearly as old as we are.
It's getting there, isn't it? Wow. Well, we'll always be younger than this movie. Well, no, we'll always be older than this movie.
Hey, shut up.
Yeah,
Oi.
Shut up now.
Yeah, in honor of our new listeners, oi. All right, so let's just kind of get right to it. So this was released on June 20th of 1975. It was directed by new director Steven Spielberg, Mike. This was his first big picture. Prior to this, he had done some TV, some night galleries, and some...
Duel. I love Duel.
Yeah, a really great movie called Duel, starring Dennis Weaver, who most of us know as McCloud.
Wow. Yeah.
Good night, Chief. Yeah, so this is his first kind of foray into the big show. The difficulties of making this movie have been documented in several other ways, more clever than us, so we're not going to go into a whole lot of that. But we are going to extract some of the funnier elements of making this movie that me and Mike kind of relate to, so we'll get into some of that as we go. Point of note here, Mike, all the dogs in the movie are Spielberg's dogs, particularly Elmer.
Oh, that's cool. The black is that the dog that gets eaten by the shark, perhaps?
No, not Pippet. We're talking about the Brody's dogs. Those are Spielberg's real dog. Yeah, so it was written by Peter Benchley, who also wrote The Deep, also starring Robert Shaw, but notably starring the Jacqueline Bisset, who essentially, who essentially did this entire movie naked.
Yes.
But you gotta love the 70s. Another thing, just for my co-host here, another co-star in that movie was MST3K favorite Cameron Mitchell.
Oh, wow. That's great. Did he have a beard in this one?
He had a whole colony of people living in that beard. So this was Peter Benchley's adapted from his novel. He ultimately got fired for general belligerence, and he was a big drinker, Mike, and he kind of disagreed with some of the third act and how the movie ended. But he made a cameo in the movie as the field reporter on the beach doing the news story. That was him. And it was also written by a guy named Carl Gottlieb, who also did a cameo in the film. He was the city council guy with the mustache, the snappy dresser. Tried to get everybody in the pictures, all that.
He reminded me of the guy that presents the idea to Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. He's one of the two government guys, the heavy-set mustachioed kind of guy. It's like a Spielberg, like a Spielberg template for government guy.
for a dumpy white guy.
Yeah.
So Mike, more important about Carl Gottlieb, of course, are the other screenplays that he penned. A couple of your favorites, Mike, Caveman, starring Ringo Starr,
Oh,
which
favorite. Yes.
we talked about on our Christmas episode, and another one, Doctor Detroit. He wrote both of those, Mike.
Wow.
So this movie went through years and years of development hell, and when the production actually started, it really got bad. But they ultimately started out with a $7 million budget. But again, Mike, this was 1975 when gas was like 8 cents a gallon. So that $7 million translates to about $42 million in today's economy.
That's still not a lot when you consider how much they put into some of these, big budget summer blockbusters. That's still,
not really.
You a pretty good movie nowadays, but not like a heavily laden special effects movie, which this kind of required with a 25-foot shark.
Yeah. So we just wanted to kind of get the ball rolling here, but before we did, we just want to go back and talk about the number of downloads and just really thank everybody again for helping the show kind of blow up. So if this is your first time listening, believe it or not, people actually like this crap. But Mike, I was thinking on the way home, if this podcast were a movie, we'd be in the montage scene where like BTO is taking care of business. Playing.
Of course. It's ripped right from a Touchstone Pictures release. Maybe perhaps Mrs. Doubtfire or somebody.
Yeah. We would be at the mall, like trying on outfits and stuff.
Yes.
And you'd come out in a really dumb outfit, and I'd be folding my arms.
Doing the little disapproval, shake of the head, with a smirk on your face.
Yeah, and then you could come out in like a equally goofy outfit, and I'd give you like a big thumbs up, and we'd high five, and
and then we would have shopping bags as we come out of the mall, like in slow mo. I like it.
Just smiling. That's the montage sketch, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Mike, you do that thing you do where you talk about the people that were in the movie.
Well, this is easier on this one because of mainly, you have the three big guys, and even in the before the movie starts, they're the three names that pop up on the credits. You got Roy Scheider as Chief Brody, Richard Dreyfuss as the scientist Hooper, and Robert Shaw as the grizzled Captain Quint. And it's that those are your guys you're going to settle in with, and they're introduced as the movie goes along. First, you have Roy Scheider, who rest in peace. He is on a lot of movies where he's a cop or a detective, and this is one of those, obviously. But then you had 52 Pickup. He was, I believe, in The French Connection. Blue Thunder. He's a cop in that one. Then he had these strange movies where he's a Hollywood producer and all that jazz, and he's a scientist, I believe, in 2010. But, he appears in a lot of these movies as, like I say, this is his most famous movie. I would say the same thing for Robert Shaw, but, this is the movie that he's kind of known for. And then you're introduced to Robert Shaw, his introduction with the fingernails on the chalkboard is just classic,
Yeah,
I'll get that bird for you. It's a great Maine accent. Almost sounds like, I guess it's supposed to be Massachusetts, but it's the New England accent he pulls off as an English actor is pretty damn good.
Really good, yeah.
And then he's also in The Sting, and he's an Irishman in The Sting, so it's even more interesting the way he can pull that off. But he's been notable for being in a couple of war movies, and from Russia with Love, he was like a silent Russian assassin that tries to get James Bond on the train, and Guns from Navarone, and I think he was in The Deep, like you said, as a bad. I don't remember if he was a bad guy or not, but it was interesting that he was in that movie after Jaws. So, and then Richard Dreyfuss is the scientist in this movie. Who this was probably right after Physical Graffiti. Wow, you can tell I'm a Led Zeppelin fan. This is right after American Graffiti, and which was mainly his first role, and then this is one where he really shows. This was probably an easy role for him to do. He's a perfect casting for a nerdy scientist guy. And, those are your three guys. After that, there's a couple people that may kind of stick out. One of them for me is a guy that I know kind of well because of another movie he was in. His name is Murray Hamilton. And he plays the mayor in the movie. He's one of those guys, you see his face. He's kind of like... he
was in every movie in the 70s.
Yes, and TV show. You would be blown away. He was in everything from like Perry Mason to Mama's Family. I mean, He was even played Big Daddy as Blanche Devereaux's dad in Golden Girls. And
Oh yeah.
it's incredible. He was in The Graduate. He wasn't Mrs. Robinson, but he was Mr. Robinson, The Graduate. And
Yeah, he uttered one of the other most iconic lines in film history, Mike. Plastics.
yes,
Right?
Benjamin, think about plastics. And well, there was and he was in The Hustler with Paul Newman. There's various movies. He's like one of the biggest name stars, and he was from North Carolina. I guess that's why I kind of knew him the
There you
best.
go.
But
Yeah.
his most famous role, you're gonna love this, Justin. This is a good deep dive for you. Is a movie I just saw recently. It's called Mazes and Monsters, and it's
Oh, the Tom Hanks Dungeons and Dragons thing.
yes,
Yeah.
it's a Tom Hanks first big movie was a TV movie where it was like warning you about Dungeons and Dragons, and it was kind of a cautionary tale.
I remember that. It was after school special. Yeah.
Yes, it was a college kid who gets caught up in a fantasy game, and he actually goes insane and thinks he's in the fantasy game. And
Yeah.
Murray Hamilton is the policeman that has to investigate
Right.
his crimes. So
Wow.
that's
Nice.
that's why kind of like he's one of my favorite. He and Steven Tobolowsky are my I love them as character actors. But
those are nice. Hey, the first thing me and my friends did after we watched Mazes and Monsters? Started playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, exactly. It's like whenever I used to watch The Biggest Loser when it came on NBC, first thing I want to do is like eat a bowl of ice cream. It's like you want to do the opposite of what they're telling you the whole show.
I'll show you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Mike, for that. As it's the three big guys. What interesting here is that once they get on that boat, they're the only three people in the movie, and there's very few movies, even with comparable stories and similar plot lines, that ever is the case. But this was just, it really kind of focused on the dread and the isolation of the whole story, and we'll kind of get into that. Some other notes about the casting here. Charlton Heston was the studio's original pick to play Martin Brody, who ultimately played by Roy Scheider. They passed him over, and the fear was that they really wanted kind of an everyman for this role, because it was implied that if Charlton Heston was there, the super macho hero, he knew he was going to live, right? So they passed over Charlton Heston, and he did take it well. For the rest of his life, he held Steven Spielberg personally responsible and refused to work with him. Spielberg tried to cast him in 1941, and he turned him down based on that petty reason alone. But probably a better call for both parties.
That was smart. That was a good move. I think
Murray
Hamilton was in 1941 too. For you interested parties out there.
Stick around to the end of the show. We'll be giving you address to our Murray Hamilton fan club.
Thank you. He played. He was Uncle Roy in Mama's Family too. Just in case you need to know that.
Mike, I'm going to have to cut you off.
Okay, I'll stop.
The roles played by Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss had not been cast almost a week prior to filming. They had still not been cast. Some of the other actors considered for Quint were Lee Marvin, which I can see that. And Spielberg really pressed hard for Sterling Hayden, who is the corrupt Irish cop in The Godfather. Ended up taking a couple bullets, one in the forehead, one in the throat. All he was trying to do was...
Is Italian good here? They have a good Italian
He was just trying to enjoy some Italian food in that nice Italian restaurant. But they ultimately ended up giving it to Robert Shaw, which is, and the rest is history. Dustin Hoffman was considered for the role of Matt Hooper, but Richard Dreyfuss got the role. The thing about Robert Shaw, he never saw a dime of the profits of this movie. He was perennially in trouble for tax evasion. In fact, he tried to set up residence in Canada so he could avoid it, but he never saw a dime of this movie, money from this movie.
He makes the movie too, like you think of Roy Scheider as the everyday character, but the drawback on being an everyday man kind of character is you're kind of stepped over by the more colorful characters, and without that performance of Quint in it, it's a totally different effect.
Yeah. A couple of stories about the production. As those that are as old as me and Mike might remember, there was a time in this country where there was no such thing as a blockbuster, and there was no such thing as a summer blockbuster, because movie studios typically use the summer just to dump some of their mistakes or miscues or with lower expectations. They put those movies in the summer. That's kind of hard to fathom now. And this was originally supposed to come out in that prime season at the end of the year. But because of the delays, it was a 55-day shoot that ballooned to 159 days.
Wow.
kind of forced themselves to go into that summer, which was not their ideal situation. But this was the first movie to receive over $100 million in revenue after the studios got their cut. So that kind of invented the first blockbuster, Mike.
Oh wow, okay. So this was released in the summer, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it was released on June 20th, 1975.
Oh wow, okay, it's good timing.
Yeah, but back then, movies would only typically produce about 5 or 6 movies a month, with all kind of staggered release dates. It's not anything like what we know in modern days here. We all know some of the problems with the shark. It's a mechanical shark. It's all practical effects here, obviously. CGI wasn't even a thing. The sea wasn't even a thing at that point. But the shark never worked, and it was nicknamed Bruce after after Steven Spielberg's lawyer. Shark, get it, Mike? Lawyer, shark. They actually ended up making 3 of them. Each one cost about $250,000 each. There was one that was like a full model, and there were 2 that were like cut in half, like a left profile shark and a right profile shark. And on one afternoon, Steven Spielberg was giving a set tour to his buddies, director John Milius, Martin Scorsese, and George Lucas. And they were he was showing off the sharks, and George Lucas made the mistake of kind of like sticking his head down the mouth of one, and Martin Scorsese and the gang slammed the jaw shut on him. And Lucas ended up getting his head stuck in there, and some Teamsters had to come pull him and retrieve him out. So boys will be boys, Mike.
Yeah.
I just imagine nerdy little George Lucas, his head stuck in the shark.
No Star Wars for you.
Yeah. The shark only has 4 minutes of screen time, Mike. Only 4 minutes. But I think it made its mark. The reason the shark is not in the movie as much is because, it never worked. And this movie really became as classic as it did almost by accident, almost out of necessity. They had to create some very creative ways to tell the story because they couldn't show the shark as much as they want. And it kind of set the model for, letting your imagination work for you. We'll kind of get into that as we go forward. Party Poopers, the Mythbusters, spent an entire Shark Week kind of debunking all the iconic scenes in this movie.
No.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Yeah. This was the launch title for the Laserdisc format. The first Laserdisc produced in 1978. I do not have that Laserdisc.
Oh, I thought you did.
But I don't have an original pressing, but I do have Jaws on Laserdiscs from 1984.
Well, I'll let you slide that time. Okay.
Yeah. So this was way back when, 1975, and most of our audience wasn't alive then, but we'll kind of give you a little bit about what we remember as 4-year-olds. This was the year that the Kool-Aid Man first appeared, Mike.
Oh, yeah.
The younger generation might know the Kool-Aid Man as the TikTok trend where they, kids run through people's fences and break them. So the first episode of Saturday Night Live premiered on October 11th, 1975, featuring George Carlin, who was never in any sketches, by the way, he at his request. Karen Carpenter bested John Bottom as the best rock drummer in Playboy's music poll. Karen Carpenter.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
She had a good voice. I don't know about her drumming ability, but hey, whatever, man.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about Laserdiscs. This was the first year of the Betamax format.
Wow.
First Betamax.
That's a foreign word for a lot of people.
Yeah. Betamax was a competitive media format for VHS, and it lost. TV shows we were watching, Mike, on 3 channels we had were All in the Family, Laverne and Shirley, and then the bionic duos of the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman.
We have the technology.
Yeah, my favorite episode, of course, is the mechanical Bigfoot played by Andre the Giant. You can't make this up, guys.
No. This is a thing that happened.
Millions of people watched ABC to watch the $6 Million Man fight a bionic Sasquatch.
Yeah. This is before the Happy Days Jump the Shark episode, so you can have your own variation of fighting Bigfoot or jumping the shark.
Yes. So we also like to talk about music a little bit when we can. So some songs on the old jukebox in 1975, Mike, were "Thank God I'm a Country Boy" by Jonathan Denver, one of your favorites, I know.
Yes, got the cakes on the griddle right now.
Sister Golden here, Mike, by who?
America, of course. What about The Hustle? This was the year of The Hustle.
And the next one was "Love Will Keep Us Together" by
Captain Tennille. I got a.
yeah.
Do you remember the Mr. Jaws song that came out right after this movie, where it's a guy who's pretending to
Yes, I do.
interview Jaws, and it intercut with all these different like songs that were really big. Like they had "Love Will Keep Us Together" in there, but he's like asking Jaws a question, and then
It was like a Spike Jones, Dr. Demento thing.
It was like I think it was a #1 song. Crazy.
Yeah. So we talked about Dungeons and Dragons and Dr. Demento. I think it's time to cash in our man card, Mike. Don't you? Hey, we mentioned Captain and Tennille. What's the captain's real name, Mike? Trivia.
Daryl Dragon. Right?
Daryl Dragon.
That's Tennille.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
Her name is Tony Tennille. So she never really changed her name. She was Tennille. But they were married, so they never changed their names, obviously. But yeah. The captain never spoke in public. He was kind of like the original Teller from Penn and Teller.
Yeah.
He never wanted to like use his voice in public, which is really interesting because he was ahead of his time, I guess.
Yeah, it's probably for the best.
That was his gimmick.
Scandalous.
They were on the Love Boat probably 6 or 7 times, I want to say, just so you know.
They had their own TV show, which featured a bionic water. Remember the bionic watermelon sketch?
No.
Okay,
stop it.
All right, how about we start doing the show for somebody other than us? So let's. So we're in the theater, Mike. The tickets were 85 cents, and popcorn's on me, Mike. So if you're ready, let's get started.
Let's catch this bird.
All right, it won't be pleasant. All right, hit the button, Mike. So our movie opens up with a very simple title card. Just says Jaws, and it's all shot underwater. And that score that Mike kind of mentioned, it's the most iconic thing in movie history almost. And that point of view is kind of established when you hear this music and you see this point of view. That means you're the shark. It's set up the next 2 hours for you. There's a party on the beach by a bunch of damn dirty hippies, right, Mike? So they're all drinking, they're smoking, because you could do that back then.
I think they're having
as much as you want to.
I think they're having a clam bake.
That's right. There's this attractive blonde kind of sitting over by herself, and she's kind of getting aggressively flirted to by a guy.
Was that?
He kind of comes over to.
Was she Sandra Locke or Sissy Spacek? I couldn't tell.
No, but I thought the guy was Peter Frampton, but he wasn't.
Oh.
But he comes over there, starts making conversation, and it's all inaudible, and then she kind of gets up and starts running towards the beach and disrobing, Mike. So that was good.
Nice.
And so she's heading off to do some skinny dipping, Mike. So, alcohol and night swimming, it's a winning combination. And the drunk kid he can't keep up with her. And so he kind of like drunkenly falls into the sand dune, and she goes out on the water at night and he's enjoying a nice little swim. And then the movie just kind of says, how you like them apples, right? So they kind of, she gets like jolted, and she starts that horrible fast paced breathing and panic breathing. And she kind of gets towed back and forth, and it's a really gruesome, heart-stopping opening scene where she just kind of gets dragged to her death. And like when that scene's over, it's like, okay, guys, you strap yourselves in, because this is how it's going to be. So the next morning, Chief Brody wakes up, which is now probably very cheap real estate, Martha's Vineyard, essentially, oceanfront property. He's a transplant from New York. And he's kind of come out to be the head sheriff at Amity, the island off of New York. And he gets the call to go out and to investigate this kind of dilemma. And he goes out there and he sees the remains of this girl kind of washed up on the beach. And he immediately kind of reports it as a shark attack and starts, doing the paperwork. The thing about Amity Island, Mike, it's kind of a Stepford-wise situation. Like all the locals have their own little weird idiosyncrasies, and they're very tribal. And they're a tourist town, and things like shark attacks don't generate a lot of business. So he gets a lot of pressure by the local politicians to kind of keep it all hush hush. Sweet Charlotte.
Sweet Charlotte.
At his protest, the politicians decide not to shut down the beach. So later that day, they're all, it's a 4th of July weekend. It's just getting started, and they're all out on the beach, and little Alex Kintner goes up to his mom and asks if he can go out a little bit more, 10 minutes more on the water, and his mom says okay. And then to everybody's horror, you kind of see the shark attack him, which is just terrible. You've had a woman get killed, and a little boy get killed. So it's just getting worse and worse, Mike. So his death leads Mrs. Kintner to produces a $3,000 bounty for local fishermen or bounty hunters to kill the shark. So they all kind of show up the next day, and they're trying to hunt down the shark. And so they do an emergency meeting to try to pacify the locals, and because they're talking about they're concerned the beaches are going to close, and the mayor kind of caves and says, we're going to close for 24 hours, and that just kind of sets everybody up because that's 3 months, essentially 3 months worth of revenue for them. And as they're all kind of arguing and screaming, we hear nails on a blackboard, and the camera kind of slowly kind of pans through the crowd, and we see Mr. Quint in the back row sitting on his chair eating his saltine crackers. And Quint is played by Robert Shaw, and he's like the perennial fisherman, grizzled fisherman. And he offers his services to the community to go out and contract and catch and kill the shark. But he values his neck a lot more than $3,000, Mike. He says he'll find him for $3,000, but he'll catch him and kill him.
And bring you the head, the tail, the whole damn thing?
The whole damn thing. So they take under advisement and then just kind of go on with their life. So the next day, the bounty hunters, after that $3,000, amateur fishermen kind of come back with this shark, and this is where we get introduced to Richard Dreyfuss's Matt Hooper. He shows up to help. He introduces himself to Brody, and he's trying to help keep order on the docks because obviously it's a circus there. And when these fishermen come in with the shark, Hooper, after doing the autopsy on the girl in the city morgue, very frustrated autopsy, by the way, immediately goes to the shark and measures the bite radius and realizes that they caught the wrong shark. But again, that's not enough for the local politicians, so they keep the beaches open, Mike. So then we cut to July 4th.
Didn't you love the mayor's suit with the ship anchors on it and the blue and white
that was really
striping?
Classy, right?
Oh yeah.
So as they're all posing for the picture to kind of celebrate the town's kind of faux good news about catching a shark, Mrs. Kittner shows up after a recent funeral for her son, and she walks up to Brody and like slaps him in the face, and like everybody in the town goes silent. And she kind of outs him for, she says, I found out that you knew about a shark being there and you kept the beaches open. So he kind of takes the brunt of her wrath, and especially with the mayor, he feels like, it's really, he takes one for the team really, but this is really bad for Brody, and he's really, he protested, but not enough. And this little kid got killed, and he kind of carries that guilt and that burden. Funny story about the Kittners, Mike. Actress Lee Fierro, who played Mrs. Kittner, who we lost a couple of years ago at 91 to COVID, actually.
Oh wow.
She tells a story. She went into a restaurant and in New England and ordered something called the Alex Kittner sandwich because she had been made aware of this, and she made an effort to tell the staff that she played Mrs. Kittner. And there was this big commotion from the back of the kitchen, and the owner sprints out, knocking over a table, and says, "Hey, I'm Jeffrey Voorhees, and I played Alex, your son."
Oh, wow. That's funny.
But he named a sandwich after himself, which I thought was pretty funny. But they actually
good.
ended up meeting later in life. But anyway, inside baseball. We get to July 4th, and the beaches are open. Of course, nobody's getting in the water. And the mayor, sleazily asks some of the older community members to get in the water to try to remove the fear. And they get out there, and then of course no good teenagers do a little hoax where they swim around in scuba gear with a plastic fin, causes this whole panic. And as they kind of come back and calm themselves down, the real shark shows up and kills the little guy in a John boat who's trying to help. He bites off his leg, which is really traumatic. But he ends up helping out some kids in a boat, and one of those kids happened to be Brody's son. At this point, no one's going in the water anymore, and they go to the next morning where Brody is visiting his kid in the hospital, and the disheveled mayor shows up smoking in the hospital, by the way, Mike, which I thought was really just a sign of the times. It's personal now for Brody, and Brody kind of grabs him by the collar and says, "You're going to sign this contract. We're going to go out there and kill the shark." And then that kind of sets up the movie. So they hire Quint, and then the next scene is we get introduced to Quint at the dock, kind of loading up his ship, the Orca. And he's a colorful character, Mike.
Likes to sing a lot.
Knows a lot of dirty limericks. Does not care for Mr. Hooper at all.
College boy.
There's kind of a generational rivalry there that kind of goes on. But they go out and they head out to sea and in attempts to catch and kill this shark. There's a lot of tedious stuff out there in the ocean. There's a lot of let the tide take them out. Brody has to chum. Mike has to throw out the chum line, which is just a bucket full of blood and guts fish. That was my nickname in high school, Mike. Blood
Chum?
and guts. Justin.
Oh, blood and guts. Yeah, I'm sure.
No, chum would be better.
Chum, yeah.
But they're getting a little tired and they're getting a little frustrated and getting sunburned. And then at 1 hour, 21 minutes, and 14 seconds, Mike, write it down.
Okay.
That's when we get our first look at the shark. The shark kind of comes up behind Roy Scheider and
smiles,
splashes him. And that reveal is just amazing, right? And he kind of walks backward in terror, and the soundtrack kicks in, and he says the line, "You're going to need a bigger boat." Yeah. And that was ad lib, Mike, not in the script. So this kind of puts them, one on one with the shark for the most of the second act is just those guys trying to figure out a way to catch this shark. And the first real fight is when they kind of hook and line him in. They try to use like a fishing rod to catch him, and he kind of snaps through the fishing wire. Quinn's main method is they kind of harpoon the shark with kegs, filled with air. And the idea is that they would grab a couple harpoons, and then the air would kind of raise to the top, and the shark would ultimately drown. But this is not your average everyday shark, Mike. So they get one barrel on him, and he doesn't submit, and so they decide, since they've got a barrel on him, they've got to stay out there all night. And this leads to one of my favorite scenes in movie history. This is at night they're in the cabin of the ship, and they're doing a little bonding scene, and they're all a little drunk, and they're comparing. They're trying to compare injuries.
Yeah, scars.
Yeah, it's really kind of just a really great bonding scene. And one of the injuries that Brody notices on Quint is he's got a scar on his arm, and he says that's a tattoo I got removed, and it was a tattoo regarding his association with the USS Indianapolis, which, for those that don't know, was this doomed patrol that was in charge of delivering the bomb to Hiroshima, and it was kind of a lights out secret event, a black bag operation, as they call it now, Mike.
Oh no! What movie was that? Oh no! Was that The Rock? No,
it was Face Off.
That was Face
Off.
So yeah, because nobody knew about it. It was black bag. You're right.
Some Japanese torpedoes, and they went into the water. They got attacked by sharks, and he's a little loose and free with the history and the facts of the story, but we get a lot of exposition and backstory on Quint's character. He was, he spent 50 hours in the water with a life jacket with hundreds of sharks around him, and saw most of his brigade eaten by sharks right in front of him. So he's got a bit of an axe to grind here, Mike. So
yeah, it's the real story is really harrowing, and it's what he said in there was pretty much what happened.
Yeah, amazing. There's legend that John Milius wrote this and directed the scene, but a lot of the screenwriters say that Robert Shaw had most of the credit for all the dialogue here. So, which I thought was just really cool. All right, so that bonding scene is kind of interrupted abruptly by the shark kind of headbutting itself into the side of the ship, and he's come out and he's ready to fight, and that's where it gets really scary, because the shark has kind of maintained a bit of a personality at this point. Like, he's vengeful and he's spiteful and he's aggressive. He's not just an animal; he's more of a villain at this point. And
when they have him actually circle the boat, the audience realizes, wait a second, he's like, he's scouting them for any kind of weakness in this boat, and he's going to attack later, kind of thing.
He wants to kill them, right? So at the beginning of the third act is kind of the final confrontation. They put some more barrels into him, almost 3 at this point, and it's just really thrilling, adventurous scenes where the score is just perfect, and it's just an amazing sequence of shots and storytelling. And even after 3 barrels, the shark is still moving, and they cannot kill him. And that's where everybody starts to really get scared, because at this point he's done irreparable damage to the orca, just starting to sink. You couple this with the frustration and hubris of Quint at this point, where this shark has bested him, and Brody makes attempts to call help on the radio, and Quint takes that as an affront to his manhood, and he smashes the radio. So they're really out there all by themselves now, Mike, and they're sinking, and nothing they've done has worked. And this is where it really gets terrifying.
They're a black bag operation because nobody knows where they are.
This is not anymore. But it kind of ultimately ends up in the finale. Quint kind of gives up and says he gives life jackets to his 2 shipmates because he won't wear one, and he kind of does the last thing he would ever expect to do, and asks for Hooper for help. And Hooper's got some, modern at the time, modern equipment that might be able to kill the shark, including some cyanide darts in a shark cage. So they lower Richard Dreyfuss into the water with the shark cage, and the shark quickly dispatches that, and then kind of finishes chewing up the orca. And then he does like a Jimmy Superfly Snuka body leap onto the boat and bites Quint and kind of takes him down, which is, I can't watch that scene. Even I've watched this movie for 40 years and I can barely get through the scene still. It's just when he's kicking at that shark.
Oh yeah, he goes down swinging though. He has that machete.
He's
in
got
his
the
hand,
knife.
and he's
Yeah,
him, so it's pretty good.
but when that shark bites down and the blood starts flying, it's still one of the most gruesome things. It's just heart wrenching because you know his backstory, and this is like irony and just you name it, it's all put into one. But he gets taken down. He kind of crashes to the other side of the ship and goes after Brody, and Brody kind of tosses in a compressed air tank into his mouth because he got ridiculed earlier about not handling those things gently because they can blow up. And his thought was if he throws that compressed air in his mouth, he tries to he gets the gun. The spirit of Charlton Heston lives on, Mike. He ends up climbing on the top of the mast as the orca is sinking, and he takes a couple shots and ultimately hits the tank, and the tank explodes, and the shark's head gets blown off. That's such a thrilling. You're so relieved for them that they killed the shark and they're not going to die. Then he kind of the bloodied shark kind of like sinks to the bottom of the ocean, and then Richard Dreyfuss, who had kind of hidden away in a coral reef, kind of comes to the top, and they kind of meet each other, and he asks where Quint is, and Brody just says no. They just come to some sort of weird kind of closure, and then they kind of they find some of those kegs, those yellow kegs, and kind of like paddle their way in, Mike, and that's kind of the end of the movie. But the camera tracks them all the way in.
Yeah.
As there are 70 seconds of credits, Mike. They're all
it's so funny that we had this movie juxtaposed with Cliffhanger, which had like one of the longest credit sequences ever.
Yeah,
and this one had one of the shortest ever, at least in our podcast. It's
right. So
that's all you need.
Maybe it was perfect. Maybe you don't need to know who Payroll or the caterer was for a movie. Maybe you just need to talk about
our Thor as Thor. How about that?
Thor as Thor. Yeah. So that's kind of the end of the movie, and that in no way did it any justice. But so let's talk about some of the aftermath, Mike. So this movie had this movie had a seven. We're getting to that. So this movie had a $7 million opening weekend, which means it recouped its entire budget. I ended up doing $265 million domestically. This is again in 1975, Mike. Ended up with a worldwide box office of $476 million, which means that adjusted for inflation, this is the number 7 highest grossing movie of all time, clocking in at $1.2 billion, Mike.
Wow. Amazing.
This was the highest grossing film of all time. This was the third one that Spielberg had done, where it ended up being the highest grossing one of all time. But this one was overtaken by Star Wars a couple years later, the aforementioned George Lucas. So
he rinsed his head out of the shark's mouth just long enough to
like,
pin a couple screenplays.
It's like, I'm sure he's like, stick my head in the shark, will you?
Yeah, like this.
It was nominated for several Oscars. It won a few. It won for Best Sound, Best Editing, and Best Soundtrack, of course. John Williams was directing the Academy Award Symphony as
nice.
When this. So he had to like get up out of his pulpit, run up and accept the award, and then go back down and finish conducting the orchestra for his own walk-off music.
Was this the same year that I guess One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest won the Best Picture, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was nominated for Best Picture, but lost, as you mentioned, Mike, to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I think Nashville was in that as well, and some other.
Yeah, Scott Glenn in his T-shirt.
Yeah. There's a lot of good movies that year. It had been the first time in quite some time where the nominee for Best Picture did not also get a nominee for Best Director. The provincial and probably fraternal organization at the time didn't feel that Spielberg was up to it, so he did not get a nomination for Best Director. But I think he more than made up for it as we kind of go. So now it's time to kind of put it in the grumpy meter. I always go first, Mike, but I want you to go first. So Mike, run this through your grumpy meter for your first watch to your most recent watch.
My first watch, I got to be honest with you, I was 4 years old, and it was one of those scary movies my uncle took me to. All I could remember was the sissy SpaceX looking woman who gets killed by the shark at the beginning, and all I could think about was her get covered in crabs laying on the beach. And I remember that as a kid just being terrified. And I think I saw the rest of the movie in the palms of my hands and just kind of hid. I've watched it since then and been, appreciated it. And this was the first time yesterday watching it the whole way through, believe it or not. I don't know if it's one of those like Salem's Lot kind of traumatizing situations for me that I couldn't watch this again, but it was amazing. I'm so glad that this movie exists. Like we say, it's the simplicity of it. It's a movie that's 2 acts. You're introduced to the rogue characters of this town. You don't have an idea where it is. You just assume it's near New York. It's on an island in New England, so that's good enough. Then you introduce these 3 quirky characters, and then you put them together on the same boat, and that's the rest of your movie, and it's beautifully done. Like you said, I made an omission in the cast. I should have mentioned the score as a cast in itself. The music for this movie makes it. I think without that theme song and without the John Williams score, which, like you say, it changes totally on the second act of the movie, and it's a totally different score, but it works with the sailing on the sea kind of thing. It is a tense drama movie. I couldn't believe it was over 2 hours. You think there's not a lot of meat to it, but for them to have 2 hours, 4 minutes, or whatever this length of it was, and just go by like it did, it was great. And
seamless. Yeah.
It's one of those movies I wish I'd watched more of now. And I know, because believe it or not, this is going to sound sad. I had seen Jaws 3 twice before I saw this movie twice. So,
yeah, well,
3D,
okay, well, I'm
3D Jaws
3. 3D, yeah, that was a good one. Okay, well, I'm kind of the same way, Mike. It's weird that you mentioned your origin story there. I saw this as a 4-year-old when my aunt took me to it, and all I can really remember, I think I just really repressed everything. All I can remember is like dropping my popcorn at some horrible scare, and I think the everything else is black. I don't remember, but I know I was there.
Yeah.
And this kept me out of swimming lessons and any kind of body of water for even the tub for years and years and years. But it just horrified me and literally repressed memory. But I think I actually saw the full version, probably more around the lines of like 1980 was probably like an ABC movie of the week, and kind of watching it then, just being caught up in the adventure of it, even with that fear of water that I had at the time. This is in its, as you mentioned pretty eloquently, this is just a flawless, seamless movie that is just, it's beautiful. It tells you what it's going to do, and it does it. And it built a standard that, thousands of movies have borrowed.
Yeah. That's one of the things watching it here in 2023, you see so many scenes that like, oh yeah, I remember a movie doing this or aping this same scene before, and you're like, oh yeah,
right.
Okay,
yeah, but it's all Jaws. I mean, Jurassic Park is Jaws, Twisters is Jaws. I mean, all of this is just any blockbuster with this kind of archetype is just and and again, this another layer of context that we can kind of appreciate as older viewers, Mike. This was made by a 25-year-old kid that had everything stacked against him and nothing worked. And say what you want about Steven Spielberg, he's got a little soft, a little mushy over the years, but he was a rogue rebel filmmaker, like a misfit, and he came up with an idea to get this movie made, this creative storytelling. The shark didn't work fine. I'll shoot this so you can't see him, but the implied violence will be there, or the implied shark. The implied shark is this hero of this movie.
Yeah,
when you see the shark, it's okay, yeah. But when you tell people the shark's only in there for 4 minutes, they're like, wait a minute. Yeah. You're scared of that shark for 2 hours, but it's only on the screen for 4. So, and that's all Spielberg. He figured out how to do that himself. So, I mean, that's
a puddle of some red dye in the water works almost as well as $1 million mechanical shark.
Exactly. There's no CGI modeling, no nothing. This guy had to figure out how to make this movie at 25 years old. When I was 25, if I was 25 years old trying to make this movie, I'd still be in the fetal position because he had these tenured actors and veteran staff and veteran crew that had no confidence in him, and he pulled it off. So just over that alone, I granted a kind of new perspective on it. But I mean, this movie is top not five for me, top 3. I mean, it's always going to be up there. It's always going to be on top of every list. So but just an amazing movie. So, but it kept me off the beaches for the rest of my life. So, so speaking of beaches, Mike,
Beaches.
we really enjoyed some of the beach scenery here, and we love beach movies. And we thought for this week's segment of "You Just Made the List, Pal," we thought we'd share with you our top 3 beach scenes in movies or TV or film or stage or screen. So, Mike, I don't have any rules around this, but a scene on a beach. So why don't you go first?
All right. And we're not talking about like Beach Blanket Bingo or Catalina Caper, or the movie beaches, movies that actually maybe only had 1 minute on the beach or 2 minutes, but it's such an iconic scene that it makes the movie pretty much.
China Beach, Dana Delaney.
Yeah. Don't get me started. All right. But yeah, it's let me go with this one's almost too obvious, Justin. I apologize if you have this on your list, but
okay.
Chariots of Fire.
Oh yeah.
I remember this. I remember the video of the song by Vangelis, who did Blade Runner very well. But this movie opens up with these guys running on a beach, and they're all young Englishmen that are training for the Olympics, and it's a classic scene. You got the music in the background. You got them running right on the edge of the water, so the sand is flying up, and they all have like these smiles on their faces and dreams of being in the Olympics. I think the 1924 Olympics. So this takes place like right after World War One, right before World War One, and it's a classic scene, and it's what I remember most from that movie, and it's and kind of like ingrained in my mind because this was like 1981 or so. This is one of my favorite movies when I was at that age, and that's my first thing that comes to mind when I think of a beach scene.
That's a really good one, Mike. I'm going to do another iconic one. I hope that I'm probably stealing from your list on this one, but mine is Apocalypse Now.
Good.
This is the scene where Lieutenant Colonel Bill Kilgore comes in, played by Robert Duvall,
yes,
with his yellow scarf or his ascot, and he's one of my favorite characters in movie history because he's just he looks so out of place here. He looks like All American Boy, especially compared to like
Martin Sheen.
Martin Sheen, and he's just bulletproof. And they take over this beach, Mike, and they don't do it for any reason other than they want to go surfing.
That's right.
They want to capture that beach because that's where the waves breaks best. And you know why, Mike? Because Charlie don't surf.
That's right.
But they're out there literally surfing under gunfire. But it's just they needed to capture that beach to surf, and I thought it was just really indicative of the time, and it's just a great scene, iconic scene. So
yeah,
my first one is Apocalypse Now.
It's just the fact it's one of those scenes you think of when they mimic this scene too, where somebody's walking through all this gunfire and everybody else is ducking down, but there's this one guy just walks along, nothing's going to hit him. Yeah, that's a great scene. I'm torn on this one. I'm thinking about going with another war movie, but I'm going to leave it be. I'm going to go with the movie The Doors, which a lot of people don't like. A lot of people don't like The Doors, actually, as a music group. And another group of people don't like The Doors. They don't like this movie by Oliver Stone, but there's one
present company included.
Yeah, I know. There's a great scene though where they're first meeting together on the beach there in L.A. and I don't know if this really happened. The cast, which included a couple of real life Doors members, say it did, but they meet on the beach and like Robbie Krieger shows them the lyrics to, "Hey, I got a new song I'm writing, man. It's called Light My Fire," and it's such a cool scene. And then Jim Norrison says something really dopey and talks about the Doors or and then he comes up with a name for the group all at the beach. It's for me is a really amazing scene. It makes you hope that's really what happened. Probably not.
I would love for that to be a rock and roll fable. I would love for that story to be true. I get it.
It's such a great scene in the movie, but I'm pretty sure it was kind of embellished. So, but for me, it's on screen. It happened. There you go. That's number 2.
All right. Well, that's a really good one, Mike. Again, I'm going to kind of go, top shelf again. Nothing real revelation here, but I'm going to go with the Big Lebowski, Mike. I'm going to go with Donnie's funeral.
Yes.
Where they throw out his ashes and they all kind of blow back in his face. But Donnie, unfortunately, he died after a confrontation with the
The
with the
nihilist.
German the nihilist pornographers.
That's
He
right.
didn't make it, and it's just a heartfelt farewell
For a minute
by Jeff.
until the ashes blow back in
Yeah,
Jeff Bridges'
yeah.
face. That's pretty good.
Jeff Bridges and John Goodman. I mean, there's no way we cannot cover this movie as well. But this is an iconic beach scene for me. So
Yeah.
my second will be Big Lebowski, Donnie's funeral.
Nice. Okay. I'm gonna do a couple honorable mentions here. I don't think these movies would step on anyone's toes, Justin. I don't think this would be your third choice, but I have Lord of the Flies. You know, the kids finally come in contact with civilization at the very end of the movie.
Oh yeah.
Apocalypto, where the
Oh yeah.
the Mayans come in contact with the conquistadors. Apparently, at the end of the movie, and Top Gun volleyball scene. So there you go. There's some honorable mentions. But my favorite, it's probably one of my favorite albums, and the movie's kind of so-so, but it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, is Quadrophenia. So I'm sticking with I'm sticking with the English Channel again. But Quadrophenia has it has one of our favorite actors in there. But it's an album from the Who that they kind of, it came out a couple years after Tommy, and it's a better movie than Tommy, frankly. But it's about the mods and the rockers. And the main character is kind of disillusioned by everything that's going on in his life. He's on drugs. They lose a battle with the rockers. His favorite scooter gets, in an accident. But what disillusions him the most, and this is very near the end of the movie, he finds out his favorite star is just a bellboy at a hotel, played by Sting. And he gets so disillusioned that this is at a hotel near the beach in Brighton. He takes Sting's scooter and he drives it up to the cliff there off Beachy Head. And you think he's going to commit suicide and end it all. And they have the song "Love Rain Over Me" playing, and then it gets really cool. And then you see the scooter go over the cliff and then go down and fall on the beach. And the guy just walks away. And it's a great just end of the movie scene. And it's kind of a sleeper movie. I don't know how many people have seen Quadrophenia before, but like I said, I think it's my favorite album anywhere. But that's my favorite beat scene.
Well, that's a really good one, Mike. I guess I'll just follow suit too, because mine's kind of a sentimental and sappy one, but I'm going to go with it anyway. But first, my honorable mentions, Mike. You mentioned earlier, jumping the shark. The three part episode of Hollywood by Happy Days, where Arthur Fonzarelli literally jumps the shark on skis with his leather jacket on.
Yep.
That was a great beach scene. One of my favorite personal favorite movies is a movie called One Crazy Summer, written and directed by Savage Steve Holland, starring John Cusack. There's a scene in that movie where, again, on Long Island Beach, this Joel Murray stars in this movie. Bill Murray's younger brother.
Oh, no.
It's a goofy '80s comedy, and they think it's funny to like bury him in the sand up to his neck, so his head is just sticking out. And he's enjoying the day, completely submerged in sand, and he asks for some shade, so they put like a beach chair over his head. And then, of course, Mike, it's because it's the '80s. A big fat guy sits down with a can of chili. The next scene, they cut to the paramedics coming and pulling him off.
Oh, wow.
But you talk about implied danger. That was one of my favorite scenes. But at the end of the day, one of my favorite beach scenes is the Shawshank Redemption. At the end of that movie, this was a sleeper movie, but I think it's slowly become everybody's kind of favorite movie in hindsight. The end of that movie where Tim Robbins is on the beach after years and years of false imprisonment, and he's kind of sanding his boat. And he's met by Morgan Freeman, who's done a comparable journey to get there. And these two lifelong friends finally meet on this beautiful white sand Mexican beach. And it's implied that it's the happily ever ending scene, Mike. But it's the perfect ending for a movie like that, and it just made you feel all warm and fuzzy. And it's one of my favorite scenes of all time, really. The ending of Shawshank Redemption. So that's one of my favorite beach scenes. So there, Mike.
And for cherry on top, my favorite beach music video is not California Girls by David Lee Roth. It's Chris Isaak's Wicked Game. Helena Christensen. Just look her up.
Oh yeah,
look up that video.
He was an ATF agent in Tennessee, as I recall, right?
Right. I don't know if it was a black bag operation or not, but
yeah,
and a couple of people died, I think.
If you're going to go that way, I'm going to go with Bow Wow Wow and I Want Candy. that's a great scene on the beach. But so all right, well, I'm spent, Mike. I think I think we're about ready to drown in our nostalgia waters, Mike. We enjoy this movie, and we can't wait to get back on the crap train. But every once in a while, it's nice to kind of watch one of these great movies and just kind of remind us why we love doing this and how good movies can be. So that's going to kind of wrap it up. So we just want to remind everybody that if you're interested in the show, you can catch us out on our Instagram page at Grumpy Nostalgia. And if you ever feel compelled to write us an email outlining in great detail how wrong we are about all our observations, you can do that
Please.
At nostalgiagrumps@gmail.com. We actually do get a few emails every now and then. I don't read them because I don't agree with their take, and I'm punishing them.
Oh, no.
but yeah, so that's not true. But just we like we mentioned in the last show, we was really starting to enjoy meeting and having some dialogue with our audience. And that's just a hidden benefit.
Yeah, we got to have a podcast where we do like a mailbag episode.
Yeah, so hey, that's a great idea, Mike. So if you got any questions about the show, send us an email. That'd be great. We'll tell all. We have no filters. So Mike, that's going to wrap it up. Anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
Justin, here's to swimming with bow-legged women.
A little shaking, a little tenderizing. Down you go. All right, so for Mike James, this is Justin, and we will see you again next time.